Well, in the same position you are, maybe not for the same reason, but being suppressed, or as you mentioned on television, that being blacklisted?
Well, blacklisted, of course, the connotation of blacklisted is that I was in subversive activities, and of course I was not, but it's a kind of a blackout because there's no place, there's no sanctuary to work. I don't have, I don't think there's anybody in that role, and that's part of the significance of the story, because after all, what are the sins? Really, what are they? And why aren't they forgivable? Because you've seen, as I said earlier, an awful lot forgiven. Nothing is forgivable in my case. I got sure.
Okay.
What are you, Mr. Saul, what are you going to say to doubters who suggest that all of these allegations are a publicity gimmick to boost a flagging career?
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful publicity gimmick in show business where everyone is reasonably sensitive to status, to tell people that you're out of work and you have no representation, no future, and a lurid past. It always helps a lot, especially when people are bidding on a competitive basis for your services. Fortunately, they're not bidding for mine. I would say that I didn't have a prepared statement, but I did have a 5-year rehearsal for this, and I'm reasonably briefed on the facts. What I'm going to have to say is that there was pressure brought to bear on me, and it's very hard when there is, I think they like to call it, conspirators like to call it, a gentleman's agreement about a performer and whether or not he works. It's arbitrary, and their arbitration. But if all else, that pressure continued. The irony of it is, it's gone on for 5 years, and there's been a systematic withdrawal of work in nightclubs at all television networks, and without exception, there haven't been any opportunists who've come along and asked me to work at a reduced rate. There haven't been any figures who represent the establishment who said I could be repatriated on a conditional basis if I, what is the phrase in fiction, sold out? Nobody's ever given me an opportunity to sell out. I either say what I think here or I don't say it at all. And should it be that there is no place to work, because the last event was in Los Angeles. This started in 1959, as I stated in the newspaper. And I mean, the adventure started in 1959. The outward suppression started about 62.
Mr. Saul, could it be that you are simply passé, that you've lost the bloom?
I don't think you'll find that by the attendance figures in any of the engagements. But the irony is that you can't go back to work. In January, I finished at Caesar's Palace, and I was told by the management in Vegas that I had outdrawn the previous attraction in the lounge 4-1, but that they couldn't hire me because there was interference beyond their control. And that's happened to me more than a dozen times in the nightclub business. And the pressure, as I was about to say before the question, reached a crescendo of sorts in Los Angeles in May, where I was on local television, and that's all I could get to earn a living, local television, for 58 weeks, 2 hours a week, and 15 hours a week on the radio. May, where I was on local television, and that's all I could get to earn a living, local television, for 58 weeks, 2 hours a week, and 15 hours a week on the radio. And I was doing a show which was about half comedy and half journalism, and one of the issues that came up, because the audience is interested in it, was the Kennedy assassination. And among other things, I got the first national interview with Jim Garrison in New Orleans. I played it, and I was fired on radio and on television. The irony is that the initial pressure was brought to me by people who said they loved their president. But when you bring up his name or ask who killed him, you're silenced. It's kind of elliptical. All his champions, who said they wanted me to stop talking about him and kidding about him when he was alive, don't seem to think too much about him now, or aren't disposed toward it.
Can you give us any...
1959, through a series of coincidences, I was represented by a man from Beverly Hills named Milton Ebbins, E-B-B-I-N-S, who also represents Peter Lawford and has for 15 years. In 1959, Ambassador Kennedy called me and asked me if I wanted to contribute some jokes to President Kennedy, Senator Kennedy at the time, of course, which I agreed to do. In 1960, after the election, Ebbins returned and said to me, the old man is unhappy with what you're saying. If you'd only listen to reason, you would do much better. And I informed him that I had no grudge against the president, but it's my basic policy to do jokes about the incumbent. And Eben sweated profusely and did from 60 to 62. And he finally told me that if I didn't get in line, which means kid Republicans only, I would think a house fell on me because the ambassador was very unhappy. I said, well, what's going to happen? Can you be specific? He said, you'll see. And he eventually told me I couldn't work anywhere in the United States. That's what would happen. And as it happened, he was a prophet, without honor in my opinion, but a prophet nevertheless. And systematically, employment was withdrawn. Now, I want to make it clear, I never saw the president, and I talked to the ambassador on the telephone when I went to work for them. But I never heard from them. I heard from a lot of people who were their agents, including my agent, my press agent in California, all of whom withdrew and resigned. And it was a systematic withdrawal of employment and social ostracism in Los Angeles, inevitably from professional liberals who told me I had gone crazy and that people didn't want to hear that anymore. You see, in case you didn't know it, a Democratic administration is a utopia by definition. So if the audience doesn't want to hear it, I'll be happy to retrain under the OEO for some other kind of work. But Governor Shriver of Illinois. But I suspect that the audience does want to hear it. I don't think the country has changed that much. I haven't found that with the audiences.
It would appear then that you disaffected Kennedy Sr., or does this disaffection run throughout the family?
In Los Angeles, and it was killed systematically. Although many guys were curious about it, the working level, it was usually killed at a managerial level, and there was no such suppression here, which is pretty impressive to me.
Do you have an agent now?
No, and I can't get one.
No one will handle
The
it?
last agent I had was Freddie Fields, who was, a very able fellow, creative management. He said to me, no agent can help you in the position you're in.
Did he give you a reason?
He said, there's just too much resistance. There's interference and there's resistance. Those are the words.
What's an example of the sort of thing that you have said which apparently has made people mad?
Well, they've never made a specific charge, which has made it difficult for me to throw myself in the mercy of the court because I don't know what the charge is. But the jokes about the trouble I was having during the Kennedy administration, I mean, the jokes were generally, I don't know, I think they were innocuous. They were the standard jokes. The president was young, and he was relatively inexperienced, and that's what I kidded about. But you're all familiar with that. You know what I do with the candidates. I did it with Eisenhower. I did it during the Eisenhower-McCarthy-Nixon period and didn't hear from anybody, except the banks, which were very happy with us all. The Democrats are something else again. Many of the liberals, again, would like me to impugn President Johnson, but I've never had any interference from him. And I take off on him pretty well. You have to. The audience is very disinterested in people that don't hold office.
How do you explain the fact that you're now working in Chicago, in a Chicago nightclub where the Kennedys have such enormous financial holdings?
Well, I have no I have no idea because I'm not impugning the Kennedy family. I worked here about 15 times in Chicago, and I have a long liaison with the people in this club, and I don't know if any pressure was brought to bear on them, and I don't know if they'd give into it if it was. That's all speculative, but I can tell you that I worked in January in Vegas, and I packed the place, and I can't go back. And then I waited 3 months for a job, and I went to Washington for 2 weeks.